Hello, guys. What is happening? And welcome to today's live stream. So, you know what? I thought I'm going to do a live stream today because I wanted to go through a scenario that I think is definitely possible. Now, do I think it's going to happen? Probably not, but nevertheless, it's still a good thing to go through to understand why it's important to have some form of insurance on your money because things could necessarily not go the way that probabilities say that it will go, and the policies that central planners and central banks have taken on over the past 40, 50 years is what we use to predict what they're going to do during this inflationary sort of crisis that the economy is facing right now. So it's going to be interesting to see. Now, the reason is Greece and Turkey obviously had very big financial crisis, and Turkey was one that was very recently, and we should examine more in detail, which is what we're going to do today. Now, Turkey was an interesting case because they, against the backdrop of extremely high inflation, albeit higher than I think it will get here. But nevertheless, albeit against that backdrop of extremely high inflation, decided to cut rates, and it had a catastrophic effect on the currency. And this is likely to happen in Canada. Now, there's a couple of different scenarios. One is that because down the road, the economy is going to enter a recession. There's a 90% probability of that happening. So it's probably going to be towards the end of this year or possibly early next year, this time around next year, that we'll be in a recession. So with that being said, if we're going into a recession, the central planners, central bankers, we've got to kind of figure out what their stance is going to be. Now, I don't think inflation is going to go away. We might see some disinflation, but I don't believe inflation is going to go away. A lot of the inflation that we see today is coming from overseas. It's not coming from internally. So just raising interest rates doesn't really work to contain it. However, to strengthen a currency, you need to raise rates. And if you then drop rates against high inflation, investors don't want to hold that currency because, well, their returns are being completely eroded. So you can see the fundamentals of how having high interest rates when there's high inflation means that your currency is stronger, and having low interest rates when there's high inflation means that your currency essentially could collapse or just go into a massive downward spiral like we've had happen in Turkey. So without further ado, let's see what's going on there. And then we can kind of plot the ways. So this is from The Guardian and The Observer here. And it basically says, it's funny, I used to deliver this paper when I had a paper round many years ago. Turkey's war with inflations, prices change daily, and everyone is scared. Okay, so basically, let's go into this. Kafadar has been wretched out of retirement by Turkey's economic crisis. His pension is no longer enough to cover his basic expenses. Now he works shifts in the bakery where he describes living from payday to payday while he sweeps crumbs off a tray. So just kind of imagine that, because it's not talked about a lot. I think a lot of people are hoping as well, wrongly, in my opinion, that when the recession hits, these central planners, central bankers are going to come in, artificially stimulate the economy. I don't personally believe that, because they've never done it in the past when inflation has been hot. And I just don't think that inflation is going to go away. Now, it may go down temporarily, which may give them enough guidance to drop rates a little bit. But then I think they'll have to backtrack on that very quickly, or they might even hold rates. But it's interesting because not a lot of people think about pensions, because obviously pensions, you pay into it, the value of that pot goes up over time. But obviously, if the currency just collapses, then your pension's essentially worth nothing, which is what this guy is saying here. So he's living payday to payday and dragged out of retirement. Does that sound good? Everything's very expensive. After I buy my essentials and pay my bills, there's nothing left. Kind of sounds like Canada today and the United States today. That is a lot of people right now without even anything else happening. So just kind of shows you where we're at. Asked who is responsible, he chuckles darkly. You know who makes inflation high? He says cryptically, reluctant to voice his opinion of Erdogan's economic policies directly. Not me, not you, not someone on the street, but who? Kafadar has requested that his name be changed for his safety. Turkey is weathering an unprecedented financial crisis after the lira lost half its value last year alone. The country is now struggling with rocketing inflation, officially 61%. Now, interestingly enough, they go into what some other experts predict the inflation might be. But let's just think about the CPI here in Canada and the United States. So we know, obviously, that the numbers are fake of the CPI in Canada and the United States. They vastly understate what the real inflation rate is. Now, if we were to use the same principles, so basically, let's say 20%, that's around what the inflation rate is here in Canada and the United States. It's 20%. So, and they say it's like 5 or 6% in Canada. So let's just double that number and you'll get into what? 120, 100, 120% because it's 60%. So 120% inflation could be more realistic. And just think about that, because it's like I've said on other videos, it doesn't really matter what the government tells you what inflation is. It's just lip service, because they can say it's 1%, 2%, 5%. It doesn't make any difference. What makes the difference is the actual inflation rate, which is more difficult to calculate, but we can use more accurate measures of measuring it from the past to look at what it is right now. And if you look at the United States and we use shadow stats, it's around 17% right now. And you figure that Canada is going to be another couple of points on top of that. So around 20% inflation. That sounds more realistic than the government's numbers. So it's important to realize that because official numbers, same thing in Turkey as well as here. So Kafadar arranges rows of delicate breakfast pastries, fluffy round akma filled with olives or chocolate, borek, and I don't know why they're going into so much detail as this. As customers arrive, he tells me they sometimes fly into rage with him about prices. Jars of pink and white sugared almonds, an entire counter of elegant layer cakes decorated with fruit and chocolate sit untouched. Now a little too pricey for most. So people can't even afford to buy a cake because it's just too expensive. All those things that were once just seen as normal everyday items that you or I could purchase in the grocery store are now out of reach. Those commodities are too expensive as the currency has lost too much value. And then it goes on to say sugar and wheat prices have gone up. A kilogram bag of flour was 110 lira back in January, and now it's 220 lira. So double. So he says, pointing out that some of the cheapest buns he has, we couldn't make the prices of the poggers any higher as people can't afford it. And that again gets you to the limit of what people can afford, because, there is a limit to that. There's a limit to what businesses can pass on to consumers. And that's why inflation really doesn't work. It's not good for an economy at all, especially when it's high and out of control like it is right now. So it then says, when Turkey's official inflation rate broke 50% in February, it represented both a 2-decade high and a huge political problem for the government. The finance minister insisted earlier this month that the surge was temporary. Oh God, where have we heard this before, guys? It's like the same music, different country. While Erdogan recently vowed to protect Turks against inflation, as the Turkish economy is getting ready to become one of the world's top 10 economies, we have said that we will not waste this opportunity with careless and thoughtless steps. He said we will get this situation in a way that will not crush our citizens with inflation. It's already crushing their citizens. That's already happening. It's obvious from this article. So again, that's just politicians' talk. We know what that's like. Doesn't change economy to economy. Spiraling inflation is tied to the government's efforts to radically overhaul the Turkish economy, keeping interest rates low in the belief that this will stimulate it and increase production. Essentially, modern monetary theory at work there. And it's working beautifully. It's not working at all. It's just completely counterproductive in this instant. Against the advice from most experts, there we go. Government always knows best. There have also been frequent changes in key personnel at the central bank, because if they don't agree with what the government says, then they're just going to replace them. Turkey has now had 4 central bank chiefs in 3 years. Yes, everyone is experiencing inflation worldwide, but Turkey is experiencing it at almost 4 or 5 times the rate of others, says an economist. This is after a series of policy mistakes and ambitious expansionary policies, including following an economic policy that evades the rules of gravity. The inflation rate has become a political issue in itself. In January, the Erdogan, or whatever his name is, fired the head of TUIK, the country's official statistics agency, angry that inflation data for the last year showed a record high. The independent economic research group ENAG, which monitors Turkey's inflation rate using the same metrics as the government calculates real inflation, was 142% in March. 142% is hyperinflation. No doubt about it, says Yeldon. Since rising prices began to bite last September, INAG's calculations of real inflation have consistently been double the official rate, he adds. Now, interestingly enough, when you look at property prices in Turkey, they are up about 60% in nominal terms. But when you figure inflation is running at 142%, suddenly property prices aren't that. Suddenly property prices seem a lot cheaper, don't they? Because in real terms, they're actually going down in value. And I'm sure a lot of people think that if the government comes in, stimulates the economy and everything like that, then it's just going to mean that higher property prices are going to come. But in an inflationary environment, if they did that, if the currency then goes down, which I think it will do, unless the United States at the very same point, at the very same time, which I don't think. I think the timelines are going to be different here. I think the United States is probably going to be a little bit later than Canada entering a recession. And I think that little time frame will mean a lot, because it could mean that Canada's monetary policy goes out the window. Now, do I think this is really going to happen? No, I don't. I think the probabilities are that they'll keep rates higher, and anything, they'll just pause what they're doing and the rate hikes. I don't think they'll actively start lowering rates. And I think if they did, it would be temporary. That's just my 2 cents on that. And that's using the past, what's happened in the past when inflation has been high, to just simulate what's going to happen in the future. The thing is, you can basically always understand that central banks are going to look at the past, what they've done, and they're going to also use that to look at what they're doing in the future. And that's exactly why they're raising rates right now. They're raising rates because they've done that in the past, and it's worked to cool inflation in their view. So they think it works. That's why they're doing that. So it's very, very interesting. Turkey's financial crisis has been further compounded by Russia. Oh, yeah, okay. But then it's basically saying about the dollar, and it's just slided more. And I mean, yeah, it's probably compounded it. But here we go. I paid a 1,000 lira electricity bill in February just for these two machines, said whatever his name is, pointing at two refrigerators holding cured meat, cheese, and plump yellow rounds of butter from the town of Rees, where his family comes from, as does Arogdan's. Last Ramadan, Aslan says his shop was bringing in 6 to 7,000 lira a day in sales. This year, he says it's lucky if it breaks 1,500 lira. People are making up prices, he adds, pointing to a large jar of honey. I could make that 400 lira and no one would say anything. I could even make it 500 lira. And it's funny because, well, it's not funny really, because this is really what's happening. But that is what happens when you get hyperinflation, because and this is why inflationary cycles are cycles. They don't just happen and then go away miraculously. It's because once people get into the cycle, there's a timeline difference. So let's say your supplier hikes their prices, then 3 months later that filters down to you, and then you hike your prices, and that just goes on and on down the supply chain, and it just doesn't turn around on a dime like people would think. So it's very, very interesting what's going on in Turkey right now. But yeah, so basically I think that's all that I wanted to just kind of get out, of that. But if we go to Turkey, just because a lot of trolls will probably say, oh, Luke, Turkey, they're not even a real economy. What on earth are you talking about? So let's go over to our good friends Investopedia. And Turkey is actually the 19th biggest economy in the world. So to just say, oh, that's just Turkey, that's never going to happen in Canada, Luke. They're the 19th biggest economy in the world. So just ignoring these things is just stupid. And it's just classic normalcy bias. Just ignore everything that's deteriorating and just focus on everything that you think will be positive for your beliefs. I mean, it's so blatantly obvious to me when people have a bias, and even I see people like Trent, who's in the chat there, who pick it up on other people as well in the comments, is, when somebody comes to me and they're so confident in saying something, it usually admits that they have a bias. Like I'll use an example that I saw a lot on recent videos, is people think that Calgary home prices are going to explode because all the people are moving from different provinces, and they are just so certain about it. And when you dig into it, usually they have a bias, like they're moving there or that's their plan to move there. So they think they're of course only going to look at the things that fit their viewpoint, because that's what they want to do, and they're completely biased and they don't realize it. And this is the thing. This is how you can really fine tune your mind, just to think that a little bit differently. You'll be able to see investments differently and really differentiate between good and bad investments in a way other people cannot do. So, for example, if you're looking to buy a stock, if you go, hey, I'm going to look at both sides. I'm going to look at why I shouldn't buy this stock and why I should. What do most people do? They look at why they should buy that stock. They don't look at why they shouldn't. And then when it falls in price, that's when they're looking at why they shouldn't buy that stock. And then they're generating a load of fear. Whereas if they just been there and they just actually done the research before properly, then they wouldn't have been scared at all. And they would have known more about the full view, the bigger picture. Because using that Calgary example again, like people forget about the people moving away from Calgary. So there's a lot of people that are moving away from Calgary right now. Now, I basically believe, I mean, when you look at the actual data, the net migration data, which is available on Alberta's website, that's the data. And basically, you can see that it's dropped. There's been negative, more people moving away from Alberta than there has been coming in for like the past 2 years. And it's only just gone positive of people moving into Alberta by like a tiny amount, minuscule amount. And then people don't even look at this data. That's the other thing. And people were saying it even when it was negative. People were saying that, oh, hey, everyone's going to move to Alberta. The prices are going to go parabolic there. And they just have no clue. They're just not looking at the data. They have a bias, like I said. But it's interesting to me because I see that and I'm like, yeah, you're not focusing, you're not looking at the other side of the coin, which is people moving away, which I see. And I also recognize that people are coming as well. So instead of just being biased and saying, okay, I'm just going to look at one side, the people moving, I'm looking at the people who are coming as well. And basically they cancel each other out. So there's nothing really. That's what it boils down to at the end. But if you look at migration data over the past 3 years, then Alberta, it's going to take a long time and a lot more people come into the province before you even get positive to make up for the shortfall over the past 2 to 3 years. But people are just they've got blinders on. And, the thing is, I actually think Alberta's real estate prices won't drop as much as places like Toronto and Vancouver. I think Toronto and Vancouver, those centers, places in rural Ontario, BC that have turned into these penny stocks, they'll drop substantially more. But here's the thing with Alberta and Saskatchewan, the prices, if they drop 30%, are way lower than they are in Toronto and Vancouver, even if they drop 50, 60%, because they haven't gone up those massive runs that those markets have gone on. So I just think people forget about that. But yeah, nevertheless, we got a little bit off topic there. It's Luke, this time is different. I cannot stomach to say that, but I feel like TIFF can't pull back this time. Yeah, you're right. And I'm with you on that. It's like I said at the start, I don't know if you caught Trent, but I don't believe this will happen. But I'm putting this out there anyway, because I believe that we should still be conscious of what possibly could happen if this does happen, because it is a probability. I think it's lower. And I think you're talking at the moment right now, you're talking like a 20% probability of this happening, but it should still be discussed so we know how to safeguard ourselves and how we should be safeguarding ourselves anyway against just policy mismanagement by the government and the central planners. Because trust me, and I know Trent, you'll be the same on this, you have no faith in these people, and I have zero faith in these people either. I think they are just out to lunch, and especially the government. The government is so out to lunch. So it is. DNPR says happy Easter, Luke, D Trent, and all. Yeah, happy Easter to you, Trader 586. Good morning to you too. Nice to see you here. A little bit early today, but I wanted to get this out because I thought it's a good thing to monitor. And then let's quickly go over and see what happened with the currency. So this is USD TRY, and you can literally see with the currency what's happened over since they've been lowering rates, and then they raised them and then they lowered them. You can see that it went up, it came back down when they raised rates, and then they lowered them again, and it went back up, and it's near the highs. So I mean, it's basically, nearly doubled. So the amount of Turkish lira that you get for your US dollar has nearly doubled, which explains the inflation rate is probably double as well. So the amount consumer prices have rose in Turkey is just absolutely insane. And that sort of crisis, we should not think that it can't happen. We should be mindful that it can happen. Now, the interesting thing is gold to TRY would have gone parabolic. So as the currency loses value, the value of gold essentially remains unchanged. And what that means is gold is worth more to the lira. And now you're beginning to understand why I believe personally, and this isn't financial advice, that gold is an insurance policy on your cash. Because let's say this scenario plays out and the government does force the central bank to lower rates and whatever, and the currency goes drastically down in value, your gold's going to remain the same value, and you're pretty much going to be able to hold that gold, and you'll be able to use that gold if necessary as well to pay for your expenses in the bad instance that we see a hyperinflation scenario, which I think is unlikely, very unlikely to happen. So that's just one thing, but it is very interesting. Now, to talk a little bit about Greece, and really I don't need to spend much time on Greece because Greece is pretty much, out there, and there's lots of videos and it's well documented now what happened in Greece. But obviously the government was deficit spending like crazy. I'm just going to simplify it really quick. The government was deficit spending like crazy. They were using the euro, and they had a lot of loans from different governments. And you better believe that Canada has a lot of loans from other governments around the world, like China, which makes you wonder about foreign interest in governments. But anyway, we won't get onto that. But basically, Greece, there was rumors that they were going to default on bond payments of their government bonds. So what happened is everybody starts selling their bonds, the yields skyrocket, and you go into this doom loop, which you can't get out of, where essentially there's no way out of that because people sell more bonds, the yields go up, that increases the chance of default. That means that people sell more bonds, the yields go up even more, that increases the chance of default. You can see how this works. Once you get into that doom loop, it can get really bad. And with yields rising right now, just imagine if they went out of control. And that is the thing. It can only be a rumor that takes hold of the markets, and a whole country can essentially nearly collapse. Now, if Greece hadn't have been using the euro, their currency would have definitely collapsed. What really saved Greece was the fact that it was using the euro, but I think they still got a loan out from the IMF. There was massive austerity in Greece because of that loan that they got from the IMF, the conditions of that loan. So it was basically Greece was in an outright depression. I visited Greece in, I want to say 2014, 2015. So not many years after the Greek financial crisis. And, it's like a third world country. Well, it was back then, probably now. It's better, but it's still in a complete mess. But it was like a third world country in Greece at that point. It can happen. It can seriously happen. The thing is, everybody is in such a precarious place. It's important to remember that these things can happen. So anyway, it's basically the way it goes. So they steal from the poor to give to the rich, Glenn says. Yeah, exactly. D. Trent says, I'm curious to see the reaction after they raise 50 points in the USA. Everyone says that the 50 points in Canada was already baked in, but it throttled the Canadian real estate market instantaneously. Yeah, it's going to be interesting, especially for financial markets and bonds. This week is going to be incredibly interesting because you'll get into those supports in the NASDAQ, again, those lower bound supports where they bounced last time. Could they go down a lot further? Yes. Do I think they're going to go down a lot further? Yes. Could they go down a lot this coming week? Yeah, because of where we're at. So the bond market, the moves last week towards the end were just, it is insane now where corporate debt and bonds are. And this is just not factored into stock prices. Any company with debt, their earnings are going down because where they getting the extra money from to pay the interest on their debt, they cannot raise the prices indefinitely because people are just going to buy less. And this is essentially what a recession is, guys, this is essentially how a recession starts. It's these dilemmas that cannot be fixed. There's no way of fixing them without somebody losing out. The consumer, the person who's employed getting laid off because now they're cutting overheads. Whatever it is, it's coming. So it's economic nuke, says Mr. Fool. Yeah, supply narrative is still being pushed. Yeah, I mean, real estate supply of homes. Once those prices start going down significantly, you'll see a lot more supply of homes. But yeah, like we've seen supply turn around on a dime here in Calgary. Like I can only monitor so many markets. So I just monitor the one that's local to me because I can walk around and physically see what's going on here. And supply has gone up, as it probably has in other centers as well. But supply is going up faster than sales. So that means that the velocity is going down. And I think what it will really come down to is when we see a substantial drop in demand, which will come over the next 2 to 3 months, because what's going to happen is that all the people who locked in low rates, those are all going to expire, those rate holds. They're going to be looking at the new higher rates, which they're not going to be able to afford. So the demand is just going to drop really quickly over a period of a couple of months. And that's when the market just becomes very illiquid. And then prices have to come down. They usually start slowly because of anchoring. But then eventually people are going to need to sell because they're going to be losing their jobs and stuff. And it is just going to mean that prices are going to go down and down and down. There's going to be a rise in foreclosures as well. It's just a recipe for disaster in that market. So, yeah. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you got something from this video. Again, I don't think it's like the likely scenario by any stretch, but it's definitely there. Nevertheless, so this is the scenario for people who believe modern monetary theory will continue to prevail. That's not me. I think we're turning a corner and it's over now. Modern monetary theory is gone. So yeah, anyway, guys, have a happy Easter. I will see you in the next live stream. Take care of yourselves. Please hit that like button just so it gets it out to the rest of the viewers. And I'll see you in the next one, guys.